My tractor broke again. I was planning on doing a wildflower meadow install this week, and once again she's acting up on me. So I think it's the carburetor. It might be my fault. I kind of goofed up a little bit and put fuel stabilizer in it from a batch that I whipped up for my other stuff, generator and sawmill and razor and stuff. So I was doing some work with it, clearing some limbs from the ice storm, and I went ahead and just dumped in that tank of stabilized fuel, or jug of stabilized fuel, and not long after, I couldn't get this thing to go above an idle. Idle's great, but once you kind of give it some throttle and try to do something with it, it just bogs down and dies. So did some research. I think maybe something in that stabilizer gummed up the fuel system, and my thought is that perhaps we loosened something up with that stabilizer that plugged off the main jet. So much to my surprise, I found a carb rebuild kit at Tractor Supply. So I'm going to actually, you know what, I'm going to take this one off, and I'm going to rebuild the carb off of that guy, my parts tractor. And we'll try that one first, because if it's not a carb problem, I don't want to take this off and then screw up something else and then have two problems to fix. I'm going to rebuild that guy first, then put it on here, and if that doesn't fix it, then I'm going to put this carb back on because it's probably in better shape. So we'll see how the rebuild process goes. So the carb on my parts tractor looks far worse than the carb on my regular tractor, but like I said, this is kind of an experiment, and I don't want to goof it up and make it worse. So this carb did work when the tractor was parked. So honestly, I could probably do nothing to it, but it's so nasty and crusty. I'm going to go ahead and use this as an opportunity to learn how to rebuild these, and we'll see how it goes. So the old junker carb came out really easy, and I know it probably didn't seem difficult, but easier than even I expected. So just a couple things you have to do here. You have to disconnect or loosen the bolt on the rubber connector to your intake. You have to loosen the swivel connector on your fuel line. Obviously, you have to pull out the manifold bolts where the carb bolts to the manifold. And then these throttle and choke linkages. I wasn't sure how these came off, but they're actually just spring loaded. You just pull down, and that ball and socket connection just pops right off. That was one of the things I wasn't exactly sure how those were going to come off, but very simple. So this is pretty cool. Taking this old, taking this old carburetor apart. The gasket looked rough, and obviously it is, but it's kind of interesting. I don't know if this is old school gasket material or if this is an old piece of compressed cardboard or what, but it's pretty neat. It's definitely homemade. You can tell here where my finger is. They look like they used a drill press, so maybe they stenciled it out and used a drill press to make all these holes. Kind of an interesting way to do it. Probably not the best, but I guess it worked enough. So I'm gonna finish taking this thing down and cleaning it up, and we've got a new gasket we'll put on here. I'll save this. Okay, so the old carburetor has been rebuilt, is probably not the right term. Disassembled, cleaned, new gaskets.
Good.
I'm not talking to you.
I'm sorry.
I'm talking to the video.
A video's a person? Okay, I know that.
Whatever, dude. So, new throttle linkage, new gaskets. The kit from Tractor Supply didn't come with new jets, so, and that should be fine. These worked before. I really just wanted it for the gaskets so that I could mount this on the tractor without having to worry about leaks. So we're going to pull off the original now. I say original, it's not original. We're going to swap out the clean one with this crusty one. We'll see if it makes a difference. Regardless, I'll probably take that one off. If that is the problem, that's bad. Since it's in better shape, I will take it back to the house, rebuild it, clean it, figure out where the blockage is. Probably some little piece of felt or plastic or something, or rubber gasket material blocking the jet. I don't know, but we will take it apart and diagnose and see. Okay, so we got the old spare parts tractor Carb taken apart, cleaned out, new gaskets, a couple new odds and ends, but nothing major. And it works. It doesn't work great. It doesn't idle as good as the tractor originally did, but it does start fine. It runs fine. It doesn't die at high throttle. So I'm home now, and this is the Carb that was on the tractor, and it looks fantastic, especially compared to what I just put on it. That thing is, I think that's original, an original carburetor to that tractor. So I mean, it's decades and decades old. This is not. This actually had a little stamp on it. 3/2017. So something in March of 2017 was done to this, whether this was manufactured or whether it was completely refurbished. It doesn't have the little tag that the other one has, so this is obviously not original, but I don't know. Anyway, it looks great. I got the idle jet, the main jet pulled out and cleaned. I took my carb cleaner and I ran it through all the chambers and the channels inside the carburetor. Everything looks great. I was hoping to find a very clear obstruction, and I didn't see one at all. So I'm going to put it back together. I'm going to throw it on the tractor again tomorrow. And if it works, I know that I will have cleaned something out. There was something about that fuel stabilizer that kept this thing from running right. I don't know what it was, but that's just a heads up to anybody else thinking about doing the same thing. Save yourself some time and effort and money, and don't stabilize your fuel. So let's recap. I put stabilizer in my tractor, not really intentionally, but because I had a treated 5-gallon container of fuel I was treating other things around the property with. I needed fuel for the tractor, so I went ahead and put it in there thinking it can't hurt. Now, I still don't know for sure if this is the problem. It could be something else. But I've never had this problem until I put this in, and then literally, 20 minutes later, my carburetor is not working, and we determined it was the carburetor. Oh, let me shut my fuel off. Or it should be off. Yeah, it's off. We determined it was the carburetor by taking my carb off my old parts tractor, which is this crusty old beast here, and taking it apart and getting it nice and clean. Didn't really rebuild it, just cleaned it out, replaced the gasket, and put it back together. And that fixed the problem I was having. I was able to start it just fine, run at high idle just fine. Sorry, there was an airplane going over. So the replacement carb, I was able to start it just fine. Idle just fine. High idle just fine. I mean, there's nothing. The carburetor fixed the issue I was having. That doesn't mean this is a good carburetor, but it at least ran like it's supposed to. So the original carburetor, the one that was on it when I stabilized the tank, and I know I could really use a set of ratcheting end wrenches right now. I took this apart. This is what was on it, obviously in pretty good condition. Did the same treatment I did to the parts tractor carburetor. Took it all down, cleaned out all the jets, cleaned out the bowl. I mean, it didn't look like there's anything wrong with it. I didn't see any obvious obstruction or sediment buildup, but I mean, there could have just been something tiny, at least to the eye, in that main jet, which is what I think was the problem. So, got this broken down, rebuilt. Now we're going to put it back on the tractor, and if cleaning the carb fixes it, then we'll know for sure there was something with this fuel stabilizer gummed up my carb. So, not 100% certain that's going to be the case. I may put this carburetor back on there and it has the same problem, in which case I will be putting this old turd back on here. And I could just leave this one on here, but now I just want to be certain that this was the problem, or that it was a carburetor problem all along and not something else, or, you know, related to the stabilizer, the fuel. Pull those out. I guess I should have disconnected those linkages first. Amateur hour. And I thought, well, this is a good time to, yeah, definitely should have done the linkages first. Because for some reason, this one was kind of a pain to get on. This one. Okay, so if you're doing this, take your linkages off before you do the manifold. Oh, speaking of amateur hour, I grabbed a Phillips instead of a flathead. Man, I'm fast. May not even need to speed that up. All right, so I figured, okay, maybe I didn't have that on there as good as I thought I did. That is not the order that I took off the first one and put on that one in. So this gasket here on the intake manifold is newer, as new as this carburetor, and it's in good shape. I'm gonna reuse it. I know it's at least good enough to run because I reused it for that carburetor as well. So we're gonna do things same way we took it off, and I know this content is already available to you, but just in case you haven't seen a video about how to install these carburetors, I figured it's so quick and easy, I might as well be thorough. So let me go ahead and loosen that up just anyway. I don't think I got it loose enough to put this one back on. I got it tight, I just didn't get a good bite on him, I guess. Okay, I think the preferred way to do this is to start the hose from the air filter and the bolts to the manifold together, if it'll let me. There we go. It's about that easy. The parts carburetor had bolts that go through the manifold into the carb. This one has studs out of the top of the carb and nuts that attach it to the intake. So not sure why those are different. Doesn't really matter. These are a little bit easier to work with because the clearance there between the intake flange and the manifold portion of the intake is tight, so nuts are much easier to get on. So we won't cinch those down super tight just yet. I want to make sure that I have a little bit of play to get my fuel line back on. Get this air hose attached. I'm going to go ahead and put the linkages on. So as I showed before, these are really easy. They've got these little spring fittings that just slide forward, and it goes underneath, good Lord, hillbilly. That just goes over this little ball for that ball and socket connection. So that's on there. Well, I don't really like putting that on yet because then it's hard to tighten your manifold bolts. So I'm going to go ahead and get the hose clamp cinched down. Alright, so we've got the hose clamp pretty well snugged up. We'll come back and tighten it once we get everything else going. Get these manifold nuts cinched down. Neither these in the first place, sorry for that noise, nor the bolts on the parts tractor were very tight, so I guess it's not that important to be super snug. Definitely don't want to break them. Alright, so even with me blabbing, not having all the tools I need, as you can see, you really only need a flathead screwdriver and a crescent wrench, although a box wrench, end wrench, especially a ratcheting one, would be much better. And then real quick, let's make sure we've taken these bolts in. So I'm obviously not a master 8-in mechanic, but what's her name? Danielle? What's the girl on the tractor channel? She knows it all, and she said take this big one, take it all the way in, seat it, and then back it out 2 complete turns. So half, 1.5, 2 turns, and then this one here, bring out 1 full turn. And that's a starting point. So I think that's your air fuel mixture and your idle screw, I think. And now we just got to attach the gas line. You need to be careful with this. One, it's kind of finicky and you're threading into brass. So you take your time, start it slow, and if it's not going easy by hand, I would recommend readjusting something, because I have a feeling that would be really easy to strip. There we go. Yeah, so if you can't get it 2 or 3 full rotations with your fingers, it's not going. And don't put your wrench on it until it does. And I know I should probably put some petroleum resistant Teflon sealant on there. I'm not going to get hog wild on any of this until I know it fixes the problem, because I may just be taking this right back off again. So if I drip a little fuel, I can fix that. I'm not too worried about it. Those are tight enough to test. So let's see what we got. Now, the real test isn't going to be does it start, because it's always started fine and it's always idled fine. The question is, will it stay at a high idle, and not even high. Like, I couldn't even put this into gear and drive around. So that's going to be the test. I'm going to warm it up for a minute or 2, hopefully, and then try to drive this thing around, and if I can, then we'll know the problem's solved. Alright, turn our fuel back on, and it's cold out this morning, like 35 degrees. You see kind of snow and ice around. I usually don't. Oh, my butt's gonna get wet. Oh, yeah. Oh, that feels good. Gotta get some fuel to that carburetor. So that appears to have fixed the problem, at least for now. I'm going to go ahead and run it for an hour or so and see if the problem comes back or if that fixed it, but I do know that right off the bat that did make a big difference. So I guess I should end this video with saying be smart about what you stabilize. If it works for you, great. But if you've got an old piece of equipment that's never been stabilized, I think the best preventative maintenance is just keeping fresh fuel in it and running it regularly. So if you have any questions or comments, let me know. Thanks.